presenting an oral presentation of Where the Map Ends, Chapter 4, Senior Prom.
It was finally the big night, senior prom, the last Saturday night of high school. The Brookings High gym had been transformed with glittering streamers, strings of twinkling lights, and clusters of silver and blue balloons. A rotating mirrored ball cast shimmering flecks over the crowd of teenagers below, all dressed in their formal attire. 18-year-old Danny Carter adjusted his bow tie for the 10th time, feeling the starched fabric constricting his neck. He rarely had occasion to wear this navy blue suit, which now felt uncomfortably binding after spending his days in jeans and t-shirts. His polished black shoes squeaked on the gym floor as he headed to meet his date, Jean Morris, by the punch bowl. Jean looked radiant in a pink lace strapless dress, her blonde hair swept up in an elegant twist with wispy tendrils framing her face. But Danny only managed distracted, polite smiles as he pinned the white corsage on her wrist. He was too focused on watching his best friend Ben across the room, wishing things were different. Ben Laughlin had arrived with Amanda Connors, a bubbly sophomore girl who had become his new steady sweetheart this year. Danny watched them chatting and laughing as they swayed together to the music, a knot forming in his stomach. That used to be him and Ben sharing private jokes and easy companionship. Now Ben's gaze was turned affectionately to Amanda, twirling with her barefoot and playfully fixing his crooked boutonniere as Ben blushed and gently teased her in return. Danny mourned the loss of those intimate, subtle gestures he had once taken for granted with Ben. Even from a distance, he could recognize the change in how Ben looked at Amanda compared to him, like she was his whole world. "Come on, let's dance," Jean said eagerly, snapping Danny out of his wistful thoughts. He let her lead him by the hand onto the crowded dance floor as the popular recent hit Catch a Falling Star played. Jean wrapped her arms around Danny's neck and gazed up at him adoringly as they swayed stiffly in place, but Danny only stared off over her shoulder into the whirling crowd. Out of the corner of his eye, Danny noticed Ben leaning in to kiss Amanda's bare shoulder as they danced cheek to cheek. His heart twisted painfully and he had to glance away, focusing on not stepping on Jean's feet in an attempt to distract himself. The upbeat fast songs were torture, but the periodic slow dances were even worse. Jean clearly wanted to melt into Danny's arms, resting her head on his shoulder and staring longingly into his eyes. But Danny tensed up and avoided meeting her yearning gaze, instead fixating on the balloon clusters overhead or patterns in the stained gym flooring. He felt like such a fraud playing the part of the infatuated prom date when his mind kept wandering. When the band struck up Elvis Presley's romantic ballad, Can't Help Falling in Love, Ben and Amanda clutched each other tightly, swaying in perfect unison, lost in their own little world. Meanwhile, Danny shuffled rigidly from side to side with Jean limply in his arms. She let out a wistful sigh and laid her head against Danny's stiff shoulder. "Isn't this magical?" Jean murmured dreamily. "I wish this night would never end." Over Jean's shoulder, Danny glimpsed Ben tenderly kissing Amanda's hand before guiding her off the dance floor, his eyes never leaving her smitten face. "Me too," Danny whispered hollowly in response, blinking back tears and grateful for the dim lighting. He used to believe in magic, but not anymore. Not when the person he truly longed to dance with, to hold close under these twinkling lights, was forever out of reach now. Sometimes he desperately wished for a lot of things that would never be. After what felt like an eternity, the band finally stopped for a break and Danny and Jean made their way back to their friends, Lou and Sally, and their dates. Danny sat sullenly stirring his melted fruit punch slush, while the others chatted excitedly about what a romantic and magical evening prom had been so far. "Everything okay, Danny?" Jean asked, touching his hand gently. "You seem quiet tonight. Aren't you having any fun?" Danny quickly plastered on an artificial smile. Of course, everything's swell. Just tired, I guess. Big graduation day tomorrow and all. A lot on my mind. Jean gave him an understanding smile and smoothed down his lapel affectionately. In truth, Danny kept replaying his brief glimpse of Ben kissing Amanda earlier over and over again, torturing himself by imagining their first tender embrace and the feel of Amanda's undoubtedly soft lips that he ached to experience himself. Graduation tomorrow suddenly seemed so bittersweet now that his special connection to Ben had unraveled this past year. Across the busy gym, Danny noticed Ben shoot him a sad, knowing look from where he stood with his arm wrapped around Amanda's waist. In that brief, shared glance, Danny knew Ben could see right through his flimsy facade of contentment, but they were both trapped in this performance now, ashes remaining where a fiery passion had once burned brightly between them in secret. The band returned and lively music filled the hall once more. As couples again flooded the dance floor, Jean took Danny's hand expectantly. "Come on, let's make the most of the rest of the night," she encouraged with an inviting smile, smoothing back Danny's mussed hair. With a forced look of enthusiasm, Danny allowed himself to be led back into the throng of swaying teens. Over Jean's shoulder as they danced half-heartedly, he watched Ben whisper in Amanda's ear, making her throw her head back in delighted laughter. Danny's chest ached remembering all the times he had been the recipient of Ben's whip-smart humor and companionship. Those private jokes and subtle touches were mere memories now. All too soon, the final slow song was announced, Elvis Presley's "Can't Help Falling in Love" playing over the sound system again. As the bittersweet lyrics filled the dimly lit gym, Jean wrapped both arms tightly around Danny's neck and rested her cheek against his, closing her eyes contentedly. Other couples embraced and kissed tenderly on the dance floor around them. Danny glimpsed Ben and Amanda caught up in their own world, foreheads touching and eyes locked, oblivious to anyone else. Danny had to look away, blinking back tears again. The song swelled to its final refrain about taking each other's hands, and Danny saw Ben lift Amanda's hand to his lips for one last sentimental kiss before the lights came up, signaling the end of the dance. Jean turned to Danny expectantly, perhaps waiting for a similar romantic gesture, but he just murmured, "I'll go get our coats," and quickly slipped off into the cloakroom, taking a shaky breath. After retrieving their belongings, Danny returned to Jean's side and guided her out to meet their friends in the parking lot, his heart feeling like lead in his chest. Everyone piled into a few cars to head to the late-night diner for snacks, still gushing about the magical prom night. Danny slid into the red vinyl booth silently while the others bantered on about crowning the prom king and queen or complained good-naturedly about their aching feet after so much dancing. When the waitress came over, Danny ordered a chocolate milkshake, but mostly stirred it listlessly with his straw, letting the ice cream melt into cold soup. He nodded half-heartedly and forced an occasional weak smile at the lively chattering going on around him. Beside him, Jean sipped her own peppermint shake and gazed dreamily out the window into the starry night, a content smile playing on her pink lips. "Tonight was so wonderful, wasn't it, Danny?" she remarked with a happy sigh, resting her hand on his arm affectionately. "I had such an amazing time with you. Didn't you have the best night ever?" Danny turned and attempted a convincing grin. "Of course. It was swell. I'm sure I'll remember it always." He hoped his hollow words didn't betray the sadness in his eyes. In truth, this night had only etched a permanent ache into his heart that would linger for years. Jean smiled and squeezed his hand gently. "I'm so glad. I know you've seemed kinda quiet and I thought maybe you weren't enjoying yourself, but I'm happy to hear it was as special for you as it was for me." She leaned over and planted a light kiss on his cheek. Here's to an incredible last semester and new adventures ahead for all of us." Around the table, their friends raised milkshake glasses in a toast. "To our senior class and bright futures," everyone cheered. But Danny just stared down into his melted shake, swirling the contents idly with his straw, lost in bittersweet recollection about the past and painful longing for a future he knew he could never have.
Find this story in Kindle Vella in the description below, or subscribe to this channel for the next chapter.